The Brooklyn Vegan Show is a podcast about music brought to you by the music blog and online record store Brooklyn Vegan. Make sure to subscribe to hear all of our upcoming episodes featuring interviews with musicians and more, and find us 24/7 at brooklynvegan.com, Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. Hey, welcome to the new episode of the Brooklyn Vegan Show. I'm BV editor Andrew Sacker, and this episode is an interview with Justice Tripp. Justice is best known for fronting the bands Angel Dust and Trapped Under Ice. He also has a solo project called Cold Mega, and in general, he's just an awesome artist and figure in the hardcore world. The main reason Justice and I caught up is to discuss the new Angel Dust record, Brand New Soul, which comes out September 8th via Popwig. It's an awesome record that I really like and can't recommend enough. It kind of is the culmination of everything Angel Dust have done so far, from their harder, more punk-oriented early records to the more like jangle pop and classic rock influenced later records. And it's just a really good mix of everything that this band is good at. And it's just even more proof that Justice's MO is just being true to himself, doing what he feels in the moment. And we talk a lot about that on this episode and how that has really been his approach for even back in the Trapped Under Ice days. We talk about a lot of hardcore stuff, but also everything from the influence of Prince to Justice's favorite Bowie album to Sublime, and specifically people who hate Sublime, to Justice learning to love Godsmack, to gatekeeping in the hardcore world, and much more. I thought it was a really fun chat, and I'm excited for you to hear it. But before we get there, just want to let you know that listeners of this podcast can get 30% off their first year's subscription to DistroKid. DistroKid is an awesome service for musicians. It allows you to easily upload your music to all major streaming platforms, including Spotify, Apple Music, and more. It allows you to do automatic revenue splits, so collaborators and co-writers can get paid too. It provides you with an artist page that links to your music on all streaming services. It allows you to add lyrics, credits, liner notes, and more. And again, you can get 30% off by signing up at distrokid.com/VIP/BrooklynVegan. We've also included the link in the description of this episode, and you can click directly from there. And now, here's my chat with Justice Tripp. Hey, Justice, what's up? What's going on?
Just relaxing. Got a couple of days down before we go on tour for about 3.5 months straight.
Awesome. Well, welcome to the BV Show. We're excited to have you. It's actually kind of funny because the last guest we had on the show was Norman Brannon from like Texas The Reason and stuff, and you came up in that conversation. Yeah, so it's kind of like here you are now. But yeah, we were talking about your quote in the bio for the new Angel Dust album, where you talked about like losing friends because of the stylistic direction that Angel Dust took compared to Trapped Under Ice, and how people wanted you to be something you weren't. And Norman was talking about like, you know, how being your true real self, like that's hardcore. Can you tell me a little more about that? I mean, I was surprised to read it that you lost friends over it.
I don't think it wasn't like as simple as like being like, hey, here's new music, and friends being like, yo, like, fuck you, but like, I don't know, there's people around who I thought were real friends, and some of which pretty openly weren't a fan of what I was doing, which is fine. Like, I don't expect anybody to like what I'm doing, so when somebody does, it's cool. I like what I'm doing, and that's it. That's all. That's what I'm shooting for. And then those friendships kind of fizzled out. And it is kind of crazy in perspective, like to be like, I've seen it a lot. I've been doing this for a long time, and even in context of Trapped Under Ice, there was like moments where like, there was like a controversy with Trapped Under Ice years ago when I got in a fight. And there was a moment when I think everybody thought it was going to sink Trapped Under Ice, the fact that I got in a fight, So it's like a thing on the internet. It was like before like call out culture was so much of a thing. So I've had people joke being like, oh, that was the first time I saw somebody canceled on the internet, But ultimately I got into a fight, and like there were some people who thought I was down, and they thought it was a safe time to kick me while I was down, And they're like, fuck you, you piece of shit, and I heard that you beat up, and what happened got like diluted and turned into something completely different, like I heard you jumped on an innocent child for no reason and beat him into a coma or whatever, like just lots of different exaggerated versions of what happened. But yeah, it didn't sink the band. There was people who were there who kind of had a different interpretation of what happened. And when the smoke settled, it was like people stood by the band. And then those people who were, jump ship, it was crazy. Like I remember I had a fool hit me up being like, hey, we announced Big Kiss Goodnight right after that, the Trapped Under Ice record. And this fool hit me up like, yo, what's up? I really want that shirt you guys are selling. And I'm like, dude, you were on the internet talking about you're going to jump me with people. And now you want to wear my shirt, and it's like, there's people like that. There's a lot of really fickle, weak-minded followers in the world, And I think that the music scene is, is representative of the world in the fact that we have people like that too. So, same thing when I started doing Angel Dust, it was controversial. It was like, people were like, oh, he's turning his back on hardcore. It's like, no, this is actually, more into what I'm doing with Angel Dust is more in line with what hardcore is traditionally, and I don't think there's anything I've done musically that isn't at least closely related to hardcore in spirit, So just going to, do my thing. If somebody is that kind of person, you see the signs of that, just keep them out of your life, But I want people who are there because they appreciate me as a person in my life,
Yeah, 100%. I mean, it almost surprises me to think that at that time somebody would have been surprised by you changing things up musically, because I mean, you lay it all out in like Pleased to Meet You. Like you're like, I'm not going to be a sheep, like I'm into open-minded people, like, and it's like people hear that, don't internalize any of what you're saying, and then the next record just sounds different. It's like,
yeah, people like singing along to the idea, not knowing what it means. It's like, I don't know. I always use Bad Brains as like the beacon. It's like my reference for what hardcore is. And there's bands that you could probably, somebody could argue is more definitive of hardcore. I don't know, but for me, it's the Bad Brains. And I don't know, like the spirit of it was creation. And I think what makes it hardcore is a mentality and an urgency. I think in all eras of Bad Brains, you hear that. Like in the most recent Bad Brains records, they're still like psychos. You can hear that in the music. They play like they got an issue, they have an urgent issue to deal with. And for me, it's always been kind of just like playing around with how to make different sounds through that lens.
yeah. And I mean, I think about this a lot now too, because like, we're obviously in this moment where like there are a lot of bands in hardcore who are doing things that don't sound just like the heavy metallic stuff. And then people are tossing around the term like hardcore adjacent. And I'm kind of like, do we really need that? Like, is Husker Du hardcore adjacent? Like, like, is Bad Brains doing reggae hardcore adjacent? Like, isn't it just hardcore?
Yeah, I don't know. I think I see that on the internet, and it almost seems like it's more of a joke now, and people are just saying it to be funny. But I get the concept. It's not like offensive to me or anything. It's like I really, I've never been like super married to the name of hardcore. Like my lifestyle is hardcore. That word, it's a word. It means like any other word. It means nothing to me. I don't care about a word, So like I've seen people use that word kind of to fulfill their own motives is typically a thing. It's like I've seen promoters who it's like, oh, you want to get paid? This is hardcore. You're not supposed to get paid. You're not hardcore. You want to get, what I mean? It's like, no, that's not what hardcore means. It's not like an excuse to not pay people. And I've seen people use it as a defense for poor actions. Like, I'm hardcore. That's how I live. It's like, that's not what the word means either. It's like people are going to, manipulate the word to mean what it means to fit what it means in their life and to justify who they are as a person. It's like, I don't know. I love hardcore, the genre of music. I love the philosophy behind it. Doesn't doesn't justify who I am. It's just kind of what I've built my life around, is the idea of how I see hardcore music. Or if people want to call it hardcore adjacent, or people have called it punk. Seen people call it pop punk, which is the strangest one to me, where I'm like, I don't know. Pop punk is a little more absolute sonically, but I don't give a shit, man. If people are checking it out and giving it a chance.
So kind of on a similar note, something I wanted to talk about is like, so I love the lyrics on Love Slam. And I think it's something that you've done before where like, not only is the sentiment genuine, like kind of what we were just talking about, like you're being yourself. You're like, I free my mind. I let go of the past. I jump into the crowd. But it's also like you're literally kind of singing very straightforwardly about what you might be doing on stage in that moment. It's like a little meta, but in this like really conversational way.
It's very literal, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. It's like I think people get hung up on this idea of what songs are about, you know? And I think when I first started making music, when I first started singing in a band, at least, and writing lyrics with Trapped Under Ice, I was a very emotional person. And I didn't think there was a lot of bands at that time. I think American Nightmare would be a band that somebody could say, like, sang about their feelings and stuff. But I definitely loved American Nightmare. But prior to that was Crown of Thorns. It was a very emotional band, very lyrically, emotionally intelligent band. Don't think there was a whole lot of that going on around that time. So, for me, it was like, oh, this is what I want to sing about. Like, this is where I'm at. I'm an emotional person. I was just a big crybaby at that point in my life. And I probably still am, but there's like things that, if in perspective, outweighed overwhelming emotions. I still feel overwhelming emotions, but at my age now, it's like, who am I? I'm a guy that loves to jump off the stage. It's like, what have I been doing my whole life? And like the idea of slamming or moshing, that song can mean something different. You know what I mean? Like, it's funny, like when you say the term slam, a lot of people, there's people who are like, oh, that's like a death metal term or something. Cause there's the Death Metal Association of slam music, but it's like a term that's been thrown around a lot for a long time. It could mean fucking push mosh, and it could mean jumping off the stage. It could mean the way you live your life aggressively, But for me, it's just that. It's just that literal. It's like people don't always understand when I let loose and want to jump off. I'm 37 years old, and like people actually, it's like a conversation adults have with you, is like, why are you doing that? It's like, well, that's because that's who I am. And if you're going to jump off the stage and break your neck, well, that just might happen one day. But I mean, there's people who love smoking cigarettes and do that every day, and that might kill them, or it might not. I don't give a fuck. Smoke cigarettes if you want. I'm going to jump off the stage, and hopefully I don't hurt anybody. That's the only risk I'm concerned about, is hurting somebody. But I mean, at the end of the day, we all know why we're there. Most of us do. There's always some people who don't, and they're a little confused when you jump on them. But yeah, it's meta and it's literal. But
tell me a little bit though about like writing in that sort of, I guess, kind of voice, because I find it super interesting. Like you said, like your earlier Trapped Under Ice stuff, it's very emotional, and like this sort of like literal style, it's so like, it's like playful. It's like, I think it's the kind of thing where I almost see it as like a little deceptively, it's deeper than it lets on, so I just like, I'm curious, like when you write a song like that, when you're like thinking that literally, like tell me a little more about writing in that way.
Well, it's deeper for sure, because I'm speaking for a group of people who feel that way, and it sounds silly, it sounds stupid. I know the idea, again, like speaking to an adult or somebody else my age, it sounds dumb, but it's like, this what means a lot to me. It means a lot to all of us who partake in the mosh pit lifestyle. But it's like, again, representing that group of people. That song, for example, speaking about, creative freedom, like wanting to be myself, and speaking about, more than just the physical expression of of what we're doing, you know? And I think it's important to acknowledge that, you know? It's like, it's so much of our culture. When you go to the hardcore show, it's like, that's the spectacle more than the band. It's the people going crazy in the crowd, you know? So yeah, it's just one important tool of our community. It is fun to speak on it, but you're right. It's like, it's deeper than just what I'm saying. It's like, you know, it's not just about jumping on somebody's head. It's like what that means to me culturally, what it means to you culturally. We're different. We're outsiders. And you know, there's a way to sing about that too, more directly, but just a different angle. I think that's a common theme on the record. It's like Brand New Soul is like very similar. It's kind of speaking more about the creative freedom of music and what it means to me culturally, and what I hope it means to a lot of fans of hardcore punk rock music.
Yeah, I definitely feel like you get that both from the words and just the music itself. Like, and I think that's been a constant with Angel Dust. Like, I think I was reading the Stereogum interview you did for this new record, and you were talking about like people always seem to come around to like whatever decision you make, like, but it often takes a while. And I was like, yeah, like that rings true. I think like I remember, and maybe it was just the specific show, but I remember seeing you like when Pretty Buff came out. I felt like the crowd was almost like a little unsure of what to do. But then I saw you at the Brooklyn Monarch show earlier this year, and you play songs from that record, and people go off.
Yeah, I think, you know, like the vision's always been to keep it moving, keep a dynamic going. And with that record, we were like, how far can we push it in the context of acoustic instruments and using things that sonically don't take place as much in hardcore music while still maintaining the energy. And I do think that was confusing to a lot of people. You know, I like challenging people, and maybe it was like too much of a challenge for some people. I hope that people appreciate it. Maybe some people just didn't like it, and that's fine. But I do think it was really confusing for people. And but also I think there's a lot of people who get it, and especially now, I think with the context of Yak, the record we did after that, and then Brand New Soul, which is the record we're releasing now, I think people are really starting to understand, like, oh, okay, it's the same shit. Like a lot of that stuff. It's like the song "On My Way," for example. It's on Pretty Buff. That could have easily been a song on AD or on Rock the Fuck On. The only difference, we used acoustic guitars instead of Fenders that had Fender electric guitars that were plugged into like a Marshall or whatever it was, and using big distortion and stuff. There's a lot of bands I think that have done that really cool, and it was just kind of a nod to that, and it was meant to be an era of the band. And there's some cool tricks we learned in that process that we utilized on doing this record. There's acoustic guitars on this record, but I think we did a better job of communicating the energy with acoustic guitars in this record.
I think like, and I'm curious to hear your take, but like to me, Brand New Soul kind of sounds almost like a culmination of like everything Angel Dust has done.
Yeah, absolutely. It's like, I think every record is the same writing style and similar themes, but I think on every record there's kind of been a different theme to push, which, you know, again, I hope it's something we can adopt and use in whatever we do in the future. But with Brand New Soul, I think the angle was like, what is Angel Dust musically? And the new theme on this record is me as a producer. Me, like, I didn't play very much guitar on the record, just kind of like worked with the band and tried to drive it in a certain direction that felt real to Angel Dust. And then just having fun with like studio magic, trying different beeps and boops and ear candy, and a lot of stuff that I learned specifically working with Rob Schnaff at Mant Studio. And like, how can I utilize some of that ear candy in the context of a fast song that has like a mosh part happening, like a more obvious mosh part, I guess. So definitely, like, there's things from all eras, and I think that's always been a thing with Angel Dust. It's like when the acoustic guitar got introduced, I think that was a big thing for a lot of people. But really, since the first stuff that Angel Dust recorded, acoustic guitar was a theme. Like on Extra Raw, which is the first EP we did, we recorded acoustic guitars. And then the person mixing it kind of was like, oh, yeah, it doesn't work. I'm taking it out. And I don't know if it was more we just didn't know what we were doing. We didn't record the guitars right. Or if they just weren't vibing with it. But we weren't ready yet then, you know? And it's, you know, it's like something that I love the acoustic guitar. And I figured out how it works best in context of what Angel Dust does. But yeah, I'd say the biggest theme musically is, I guess, just total control as the producer. Not that I think anybody's ever been actively trying to stop my vision, but just to have like total control of my vision, to be like, okay, I wanted it to sound like this. How do I make it sound like that? This didn't work. I'm going to try something else. A lot of spirit of invention and just trying new things.
So this is the first record you did with your current live band, right?
Yeah.
So what was it? I know, like you said, like you're in the producer's chair, but what was it like working with this new band in the studio? What did they bring that made this record different than previous Angel Dust records?
What's cool is I've been playing with these guys for almost 2 years now. I think it's still new to a lot of people who haven't seen us in a little bit. But it's also people who've been touring with Angel Dust for years before that. Because, you know, even when the lineup was, you know, members that are in Turnstile full time now, there was times when this person couldn't do it, this person couldn't do it. So I've been playing with these guys for a long time. And it's also worth mentioning that Pat and Daniel, who were formerly touring with Angel Dust, they came and played a little bit on the record. It was cool. It was like cool to kind of like step back and just be like, what is everybody strongest at? And try to like give them a role to best do their thing. So like Daniel plays a lot of percussion on the record. He just has like cool, fun. He's awesome to have in the studio. Daniel Fang specifically. Our guitar player, who's the full-time guitar player of Angel Dust, his name's also Daniel. He's like a shredder. And it's cool to step back. I'm so used to like going in with a strict game plan and saying, all right, here's all the guitar leads. The guitar is going to do this here and here and here. And I had some of those things in mind, but Daniel just shut that down. He was like, no, I got the ideas. And it was cool. We had a lot of good input, some cool guitar stuff that I would never think of. Everybody was really, really inspiring in the studio. It was awesome. Steve, who's playing guitar for us now, he's like a freak about sounds and like tone, and like just would, you know, always challenge the ideas that I had for guitar sounds. And I think it was always for the best. Tommy's relentless. He's the drummer. He just like, it's crazy. I feel like you can drill him all day long and he doesn't get beat down by it. I see a lot of times drummers in the studio, if you keep changing things, they get physically exhausted, they get scared, they get mentally exhausted. Tommy would just record. He's great in the studio, so he'd just nail it in a take. And then you could say, oh, let's try completely different now. And you're like waiting for him to get upset. And he'd be like, okay, just do it. You know, it was really fun. Really like being the producer.
What were some like specific musical influences on this one? Stuff you were listening to that maybe pushed you in the stylistic direction of the record?
I think I'm like just a fan of just like rock and roll history and pop music, and especially where pop and rock meet, you know, which was, I think, much more of a thing in the 80s and the 90s, which seems to be becoming more of a thing in modern time. But like, I'm in love with Prince and David Bowie and Iggy Pop. So, I mean, those are themes that are pretty reoccurring. I would say, honestly, the Prince thing is probably like the most reoccurring theme on the record, but it's subtle. It's like, I've always liked, you listen to all those bands, you can see these intersections of hardcore music. It's like, if you listen to like early Prince records, there's like songs where it's like playing literally like a slow D beat, you know, it's like, granted it's slower. It's like, you know, so it's like more of a dance thing. It's like when you listen to like early Black Sabbath, there's just like, that's, I mean, I get it. You can call it rock and roll music or doom or metal or whatever you want, but it's like so much of the building blocks of hardcore and punk rock. Like Paranoid is like a hardcore song, really, you know? I always loved that intersection. So that was like kind of a theme, is being like, okay, this is a song that could be a pop rock song, it could be a hardcore song, and then it's kind of written in that way, and then we get together and we reevaluate it and let the people play on it how they do. And everybody in my band comes from hardcore punk rock music, but also loves pop rock. So it's cool. I don't know, just trying to, maybe not trying, maybe just doing what feels good. That's a bigger piece of the equation.
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting because, like, I don't think your average listener would put the record on and be like, oh, I totally hear Prince,
Yeah.
but to have it come through the way it does with the lens you're talking about.
Yeah, Prince has been a theme, honestly, man, in everything I've ever worked on in my life. Like, there's certain songs I can listen to it immediately. I'm like, oh, that was a Prince thing, like an early Trapped Under Ice stuff. Even now, we're going to hear that and hear Prince. Definitely not. But people have always kind of spoke about Trapped Under Ice in context of pop influences with hardcore. Like, oh, there's this pop value, and it's like little hooks, ear candy, earworms, reoccurring themes. But I think with this record is, and again, being in the producer's chair, I got to emphasize that a lot more than I ever have. And I think it feels organic and natural. And by no means do I think, it's representative of Prince. I wouldn't tell somebody it sounds like Prince, but um, just think he really embodied so much of the punk spirit and just smushed all these genres and themes together that don't exist in punk music in a way that felt organic and natural. And it's like the link, that thing, I call it punk because that's how I was raised, but that thing that makes the blues real, that makes rock and roll real, hip hop real, punk rock music, hardcore music, what makes it authentic, human. That's what I always refer to as punk, but it's like that spirit, it's brand new soul. That's what, it's like us fully, that's what this record is. That's the statement. It's fully committing to that human, real nature of rock and roll music.
Yeah. And I feel like that is kind of like, what I was hoping to get at when we opened this conversation. Like, just that to me is what comes through. I think, like, you might not be doing what the fan of your last record wants you to do, but it always seems to me like you're doing what's authentic to you in that moment.
Yeah, it's cool. I feel like as a fan of music, that's like what I always love about hearing anything. It's like, I'm just a fan of everything David Bowie did. There's records that I don't give a shit about, it's like up even to Black Star, the last thing he did before he died. It's so authentic to a pop star who's dying and knows he's dying. It's like, it's not a hit record. It's not meant to be a hit record. It's like, just look at Iggy Pop, man. It's like, he's done so many records, and I think some people tune some of them out because it's not their thing. And it's like, who cares if it's my thing? He didn't write the record for me personally. It's like there's a lesson in there. And with Iggy Pop, I think more than anybody, like it or not, it's so authentic to what he wants to be doing right then and there. And I can listen to anything he does and hear like a new angle of expression. And that's really inspiring.
Yeah. And it's like so interesting because, like, yeah, like, I mean, Iggy Pop is on one hand, like, argued like one of the architects of so much that we call punk. And then on the other hand, he might just make a jazz record one day, and that's cool too. And he can do that if he wants to.
Yeah.
What's your favorite Bowie record?
Oh, dude, I literally just, it's so funny. I literally just decided this like a week ago. I like went through but also I'm like, I have like ADHD. My brain forgets stuff. So I'm literally looking it up on Spotify right now to tell you what it's called. It's one of the more obvious ones for sure. Let's Dance. Yeah, it's Let's Dance.
That's interesting. Why that one?
It's just hooky. It's like huge hits, dance music. And it's like the thing in that makes me want to get up and move is not that different than the thing that makes me want to get up and move when I listen to Hate Breed Satisfaction is the Death of Desire. It's like, it's rhythm. It's like taking soul and applying it to different fields of rock and roll music. It makes you want to get up.
I mean, I do feel like hardcore or even just rock music in general, like it's ultimately dance music.
Yeah, it's crazy, man. I just it blows my mind that people get so hung up on the genre and how they identify with music. Like I don't. There's people who are really defensive about that. Like there's people. This is a conversation. I was like Sublime, the band Sublime. It's like I'll bring it up because I know it's polarizing. It's like one of those things that people really hate and people really love. And it's like, dude, I don't give a fuck what genre it is. It's like it has that thing. It has that human element to it. I love Sublime, and it does that for a lot of people. And I always love to bring that up because you can gauge somebody, and it doesn't say anything about Sublime. It says something about you, the listener. When somebody's like immediately offended by Sublime, it's like, oh, you're a person who really cares about what people think. And that's why it's so important that you have this extreme stance about Sublime, because otherwise, if you really just loved music and you had zero fear, which is where I'm at this point in my life, I do not care how the average person perceives me. Do you know what I'm saying? I do care about how I present myself and who I am as a person, but there's people who they've been created an identity. They don't know who they are as an artist, and them liking Sublime or not somehow defines them to you because their character is that weak. And when you bring that up and somebody's like, oh, I hate Sublime, that's who I am. It's like, get a life, dude. Go make some music. Go express yourself. Go define yourself. You know, it's like, if you don't like the music of Sublime, that shouldn't be offensive to you. They're a good band. They do something for people. They like make people feel really good, you know? I don't think they're a band. Now, I get being offended by music that compromised the integrity of music. You know, like there's things in the world that are just that offensive to music, but I think they're really few and far between.
Yeah, I know exactly what you mean because I do this too, but I usually use Nickelback as my example.
Yeah.
Where I'm just like, if you like hear Nickelback and you're like, I hate Nickelback, like I'm like, you don't hate Nickelback. You want me to think you hate Nickelback.
Yeah, you got a point to prove. It's like, I don't
Right.
think Nickelback is the coolest band in the world. Like, but it's like, it means something to people. You know, it's like, it's a good example of this for me is like, I just never perceived this band. I never like took it in, but Godsmack. I think I was young and I was like really into hardcore at the time. And then this band was kind of comparable to hardcore because it was like white rock guys making heavy music. So, you know, it was like people in middle school would be like, you like Godsmack? And I'm like, no, I like hardcore music. That's it. That's who I am as a person. This is my identity. Let me project my identity onto you. And but it's never a thing that I've been like offended by, or never something I've really given a good chance. And we just played a fest with them with Godsmack. And our bass player Zechariah, he's like loves Godsmack. And he like challenged me to be like, he was like, dude, you don't love Godsmack? And I'm like, no, I just never really perceived him. And you know, there's somebody in the band who was like, oh, I don't like Godsmack. And he was like so offended. He's like, what do you mean you don't like Godsmack? So we went and watched Godsmack. And I was like, they were awesome. Godsmack was awesome. I like didn't know that it's something that, you know, it's like, am I gonna like bump the track? I will say for like a week in the van afterwards, we were bumping Godsmack. But like, it doesn't have to be my identity. It doesn't have to be the thing that I hold closest to my heart to see the value in it and appreciate it. You know, it's got something for people, and people really loved it and had a good time. And I mean, most people will live their whole lives and never get the opportunity to connect with people or like help people through their art, you know?
Totally. And it's like if you're making that connection with so many people, like you're doing something right. Like
Yeah. Yeah, I
and
agree.
and I know what you mean. I mean, I feel like, you know, you're young. Like there has been so many bands for me that when I'm like in high school, I'm like, oh, I don't like that band. And in hindsight, I'm like, the only reason I said that is because it didn't jive with my identity at the time.
Yeah.
And like, yeah, I'll go to these festivals. I'll see, like, when I grew up, I was like, I don't like new metal. You know, that was like I was like a thing I said. And then like as an adult, I saw Slipknot, and I was like, unbelievable, you know, like, and it's like, and I realized like I probably would have liked it then too if I would have really listened, but I was like, no, I don't like that they wear masks and they look weird, and I like punk, and punk's more authentic, and you know, but it's, you grow out of that, and it's kind of, I think it's nice to grow out of that and not be stuck in it forever.
It's funny. I think Trapped Under Ice was that for punks. A lot of like punk fans, and you got to know, it's like I grew up involved with punk music, and like so important in who I am as a person. And I knew when we were doing Trapped Under Ice was provocative. It like stood out in context of punk music. And I feel like now I'm experiencing a lot of people who are like, oh yeah, like when it was happening, I didn't identify with it. And we were doing things to stand out, like style wise. It's like I was wearing baggy jean shorts or like camo pants, Timberland boots and stuff like that. Just like trying to stand out, And like, what does standing out mean? Like, does it mean anything? It means I'm wearing something that you're not to define myself. And people are threatened by that, and especially in the punk community. Well, I wear this and he wears this. I can't like that. What's it mean? Like, he must have bad values. He must be a bad person. He must. Nah, I'm doing the same shit you've been doing. In fact, I've helped cultivate what you're doing. But I'm just wearing something different because I don't want to look like everybody else and call it punk like you do, And it's funny because a lot of those people who weren't down, back when Trapped Under Ice was an active band, now they tell me, it's like, I'd never give it a shot. I didn't identify with it. Now I love Trapped Under Ice. Now it makes sense. And I see that on the internet. Sometimes people saying stuff like that, which I think is really cool. And I think it's kind of a similar thing with Angel Dust in context of hardcore, whereas like hardcore fans, there's a lot of people who didn't identify with it right away immediately because it's melodic, and they've grown to believe that hardcore is what Trapped Under Ice is. I helped set the tone for what defines hardcore. And it took a long time and a lot of work. And, it wasn't until, I don't even think till the last couple of years that we really truly reaped the benefits of it. Like, we were really poor. We didn't make money. We were like, I didn't have a home for most of the time that Trapped Under Ice was a band, I wore the same, you can look at photos of Trapped Under Ice playing, and I'm wearing one of 4 pairs of shoes. We were a touring band for over 10 years. I'm wearing one of 4 pairs of shoes in the entirety of Trapped Under Ice being a band. That's kind of crazy. Like, all my friends at home would be like, look at my new shoes. I'd be like, that's crazy. I wore these shoes on stage to sleep. Like, when I go to work, whatever, I wear these shoes for the last 3 years, and then I'll get another pair of shoes and I'm wearing for 3 years, and they're going to fucking smell like shit because I'm going to rock and roll on stage. And you know what I mean? Like, didn't have anything. And it's like only now I think people are starting to, like, in the last couple of years, people are acknowledging the level of influence. And it's really cool. It's humbling. So again, that started in the last couple of years. I feel like only in the last couple of months do I feel like people are starting to identify Angel Dust and the influence and context of hardcore music and where hardcore music is now, and it's, it's nice to be appreciated, but also, like, again, I want to be ahead of the curve. I want to be challenging people. If that leads to, if I can like make a living making music and challenging what is cool, but that's not how it always works. So I'd rather that than, I've always felt like I know how to make the record that sells. Like, I know that. Like, I know I have and you can say it's in theory, but maybe I'm wrong. But it's like I always have this theoretical idea of a record that will crack, and I don't want that. I'm not interested in that. Maybe it's stupid of me. I don't know. But it's like when we did Big Kiss Goodnight with Trapped Under Ice, we had no idea that it would have the cultural effect that it did. And when it came out, nobody gave a shit. That's a crazy thing that I think people talk about it like it was such an important record. I think in the last couple of months of us touring on it, people saw it, and then we cut out right at the right time. We stopped playing live for a couple of years, and people doubted us. We put out singles and people hated them. And then we toured on the record and people loved it, and they started to love it more, and they loved it more. And then we were like, hey, we're not doing this anymore. And I think it grew in that space, in that absence, the desire to have it. And it's, it's like, again, I feel like with Brand New Soul right now, the reception's been pretty cool. I think people are starting to get what it is. I guess there's people who've always gotten it, but Yeah, it's not the record to sell units. We didn't make that. That's for sure.
Well, I could just be like too personally biased, but it feels like Brand New Soul is like the people who needed to catch up to like Pretty Buff and Yak. This feels like, okay, if you've put that work in, if you've stuck with us and maybe you weren't ready for that and now you get it, like this record's for you, kind of. That's how it feels to me a little bit. Like
Yeah,
it's like, okay, like we're gonna do jangle pop stuff, we're gonna have acoustic guitars, but we're gonna have like mosh parts too. And so it's like it's that full circle thing. And it's like yeah, I don't know. I mean, the Monarch show you played this year, I think you like did Love is the Greatest into Toxic Boombox, two songs that feel like they couldn't be more different, but it was like seeing it live, I was like, oh. And it's like Brand New Soul gives you the same feeling that those two songs back to back live give you, I think.
yeah, that's cool. You know what? Those two songs back to back. I don't think it was conscious at any point, but it somehow I realized the idea behind that comes from Ceremony. Like Ceremony would do that, where they hit you with the fucking weird synth track. Somebody holding a button on the synth and he's just talking his little shit, and it's all weird and spacey, and you're like, damn, this is gonna be a really chill live set. And then they just break out into the craziest song. And to be able to create that moment, it's like, I think that's such an interesting thing. Again, it's like there's a formula we know for live. And Ceremony knew this before. We can build the band, we can ramp the crowd up and start with the big song and do the thing and get the energy going. Or we can confuse people and create a moment that people are truly going to remember, and that always stuck out to me. So I've always wanted to do that with Angel Dust, like have these peaks and valleys, a lot of dynamic in the music, bring you down and bring you up so that people remember that moment when Toxic Boombox kicked in and fools all jumped off the stage and started acting weird. It's cool. It's cool to be inspired by your peers. Obviously, like I love a lot of old rock and roll music and just I love the history of music, but there's friends and people who I see as peers and people I don't know at all who are just making great music currently. And I think that's important too, is to have your ear to the ground currently.
Yeah. I know exactly, like I totally see Ceremony exactly the same way. Like they're another band too, I think, where like people get confused when they put out a new record. Like, oh, like, here's this like power violence band. And then on the next record, they're like more of a punk band. And then now that people are used to that, they're more of like a garage rock band. And now that people are used to that, they're more of like a goth band. Like,
Yeah.
and I've seen some real negative reviews of Ceremony records, like people getting upset, but then, yeah, you go see it live and it's all coming from the same place. And I think if you don't go see Ceremony live, you miss that aspect of it.
Dude, I think every time I've seen one of those like negative reviews or just like an individual talking poorly about a new Ceremony thing, it's just like they always come to be disproven. It always comes to light that it's like those are the most important records for our community, and they create these really culturally important moments. And I just said something. I just posted something about it online the other day. So it was like an interview with Anthony, the guitar player, and it's like, dude, I truly would not be who I am if it wasn't for that band. And it's like music wouldn't be what music is now. There wouldn't be space for a Turnstile. There's a couple bands who I think were really provocative in the time when hardcore was super. I don't want to say sterile, because hardcore is just cool, like in all shapes and forms. But there was just so many rules at the time, and no band broke the rules down for me like Ceremony. And I've always had that desire just to do whatever I want, and I think they are probably the band that's influenced me the most in the field of just doing whatever the fuck I want.
Who are some other bands that you think like broke those rules?
Like modern bands.
Yeah.
Cold World. It's like a band when somebody told me, like when they were a new band, oh, it's this new hardcore band and they have like a DJ. There's like record scratching on the. So at that time, the closest frame of reference was Limp Bizkit. They were like, oh, that's a thing that happened. These guys are late. They're late to that. And then you see it live and you're like, oh shit, hardcore can be anything, Um, I don't know, man. I think that's just hardcore in general. Honestly, the hardcore scene has constantly been blowing my mind. And it's like when you've been around long enough, you realize that's what's really exciting. I think people hear something new and it's got a hard mosh part and they're like, oh, it's the mosh part. That's the important thing. You see a crazy mosh pit. That's the important thing. What they don't realize, the reason why people are being excited is because they're being challenged a lot of times. And it's like, that's why the hardcore scene is constantly moving and evolving. And it's like, there's no definitive sound of hardcore. That's what hardcore is. It's changing. That's the point of it. It's progressive. It's meant, that's punk. It's progressive. It's meant to be progressive. If at any point we're just trying to please the people and what they like, last year in 2022, people really liked a very progressive band. I'm not using them as an example of a not progressive band, but everybody really liked Gulch, hugely progressive band. It's like that was the last couple of years have been defined by that band just fucking doing crazy shit and still making you want to move. It's like if in 2023 where I tried to do a Gulch record because that's what was cracking, 2024 I'm trying to do a Gulch record because that's not hardcore anymore. That's like we're so far removed from hardcore at that point, but yet there's people who still do have that mind frame. They're like, oh, something changed. It's not hardcore anymore. High Vis, I think, is another band in current time that really challenges that idea, where it's like I don't know how to classify that band other than hardcore music. They have that urgency. Like I was talking to Bad Brains. It's like almost like these dudes were, inspired by sonic elements of Britpop and Joy Division and some other cool rock and roll things, but the urgency of how they play, and they're all fucking weirdos. You see them on stage, it's like couldn't be more clearly a hardcore band. How am I going to react? I gotta slam. I love slam. I gotta jump off the stage. I might not do a spin kick, but again, it's like slam comes in all different shapes and sizes, and they're authentic. And I don't think there's any question. I don't think anybody's questioning the hardcoreness of it or not, And if they are, who cares? It's like, again, it's just a word.
So why do you think that the sort of heavy metallic kind of 90s style hardcore tends to be the thing that I guess, say, purists tend to cite? It's interesting to me because it's like Minor Threat and Black Flag don't sound like that, but it seems like that kind of like heavy metallic beatdowny stuff, that seems to be the thing. When people see something get too melodic, they go to that.
I think a big part is just cool. Like it really is cool. It's awesome. I think a lot about like what defines that and what makes it so interesting. And I don't say this in a condescending way. I'm telling you, this is my life. This is who I like. It's the music that shaped me. One thing is, rhythmically, it's pretty simple. You take out a lot of polyrhythms. Like in like a dance song, you might have a cool drum beat, boom, 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 and then you'll have like a shaker doing a polyrhythm, and then the guitar player is playing a polyrhythm. In dance music, you have all these rhythms that are overlapping, and just with hardcore, it gets like that specific, that 90s metallic, heavy, extreme hardcore. It gets dumbed down in a way that I love it. And I think a lot of people relate to it, where you take out all the polyrhythms and now the guitars, drum, and bass are all doing the same rhythm. That's a breakdown. Dun, 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 dun. Those moments, like the simplicity of it, we all have that in us, And you can like do a million things to build up to that moment, but that defines that sound. It's fucking cool. And culturally, there was nothing like that in history. There was just that advanced in sonic tone and territory and production while being as Neanderthal and ignorant and almost dumb, We all have that in us. But I do think there's like a natural thing to it. There's bands that have just done it really well. It's a lot of reasons. And again, it's like, it's outsider music, It's like, that's the most outsider thing you can do. It's just a heavy ass breakdown, It's like your mom will never overhear that and see the rock and roll music she loved growing up in that. I hope it's always a thing, And then, it's like that alone, that vibe alone has branched off into so many genres of music. It's like metalcore. It's like such a broad, vast genre of music. It means what is metalcore? It's everything. It's like such a broad thing. But I think again, the universal thing is that the breakdown, the mosh part, So while I do love that, for me, a part of my journey has been experimenting with the mosh part. Like what can get people up and moving and can speak to somebody's heart and soul without just doing that,
So you mentioned like you love being inspired by your own peers. Tell me about the Coneheads cover on the record.
Oh man. I couldn't call them peers. I've never seen the Coneheads live. At the time they were a band, it was like Trapped Under Ice was touring full time. And I was obsessed with that band. But, it was like the most I could get was like ordering something on the internet or like watching YouTube videos or like asking friends, But it's a band that I think embodies that hardcore and punk nature and just made something completely different with it. It's like not comparable to anything else before it. Like I think people compare it to Devo a lot, but it's like, is it? I don't, it's like I can hear that they probably love Devo, yes, but it's just so much of its own thing and it's extreme. And we like played a couple songs that we wanted to cover, and we actually recorded another cover that will probably come out later. But I don't know, that song is just so authentic to the spirit of hardcore punk rock music that we played it together and was like, oh yeah, this is easy. It's like this. It's like no different than playing like a Cro-Mags cover or something like that. It feels so real and natural. It's funny. I showed it to a couple of friends, and I sent to a friend who I thought would recognize that it was a Coneheads cover. And he said, man, that's the best song you've wrote in your entire life. That's my favorite song you ever wrote. I was like, cool. That's the one song ever recorded in my life that I didn't write. But it's cool. It fits on the record and it feels cool. And that's a band that like has influenced me. Like, dude, just like in context of whether, when I was doing Trapped Under Ice, it truly was a thing that influenced me. Again, not something anybody's ever going, oh, I hear the Coneheads in the Trapped Under Ice record. But just like being like, what is hardcore? I don't know. It could be anything. And same thing goes with Angel Dust. So I'm glad we got to get it in there. And it is, again, like I said, they're not our peers. It's not a group that we played to or we were involved with. So I kind of expected them to be reluctant because I get the sense of that just like that group being as weird as I am in a different way, and I'm protective and I'm weird and I have weird feelings about art. So I reached out to them like, hey, I'm going to record this song. And they just seemed cool about it. Talked to Mark, who's the singer. I showed him the recording. He said it sounded like Andrew WK.
That's funny. So, I do think what a lot of people will pick up on with Brand New Soul is people will probably talk about it being the most aggressive Angel Dust record since Rock the Fuck On Forever. And I remember like when Trapped Under Ice played Brooklyn this year, you talked on stage about like, you were like, I was a little bit gone from aggressive music for a while, but like, I'm so excited to do it again. Talking about keeping your ear to the ground, what are some new, younger, like aggressive bands that you really love?
Oh man, it's crazy because there was a moment when I was burnt out on it where, and it's not like I was like, just like naive or like or whatever. I don't fucking know. It wasn't like my ego or like I was jaded. I love this shit. I study it, and again, there's always bands that pop up, but I think right now is the coolest wave of heavy music. And there's like, I think there's a lot of successful heavy music hardcore bands right now that I don't need to name. We know who they are. It's like, we know Turnstile is the biggest band in the world. We know Scowl is cool. Like I love and respect those bands. As far as like, but there's like a wave of like younger, newer bands. And I think it's weird. I've always had bands in California that I like, but right now the wave of hard music I like is California, like definitively. So I really like Big Boy. Twist of Cain is a big one. Terena, Firestarter. There's like just lots of cool, very authentic sounding hard music. And I think there's like an interesting lineage of hardcore to come from California when we look at some of the Rev releases that bands didn't capture right for a long time, you know? And I don't know, I think it's like just kids in that area just like really just like broke down some heavy music boundaries and did some progressive things while taking influence from West Coast hardcore music, and it's like authentic to, you know, like I'll be real, it's like I think a lot of hardcore music stems from the East Coast. A lot of hardcore and punk stems from the East Coast, and then, you know, like all over the world, it just grows from the East Coast United States, and people do their own thing with it. As to where it's like right now, I'm like, damn, this is an like authentic, heavy group of bands. They're just doing something that's California and unique to themselves. And it's also worth mentioning Section Hate is like clearly a really influential band. I think I would say that they probably have a lot to do with why a lot of young bands from that area have been like, we're just going to make psychotic hardcore music, and we don't care if it's marketable or something. We're just doing our thing, and it's real and exciting.
So this is a question I ask in, I've asked in other interviews too, but you know, like you said, I mean, obviously we're in a period where hardcore is bigger than ever, and like maybe someone's finding their way in through Turnstile, maybe someone's finding their way in because they saw Scal on the Coachella live stream, and then also, you know, like you said before, hardcore is outsider music. People get protective, so like there's all this, you know, chatter online about like the sort of gatekeepiness of it. So my question is like, if someone's new to hardcore, if someone's here because they heard Turnstile, they heard Scal, what do you think they should know?
It's weird, man. I have this part of me that says they don't need to know anything. Just know that you love it. Just like know that this isn't, you know, it's like, it's not all about marketing and branding what we're doing. There's obviously marketing and branding involved with this, but it's like, this is just authentic. It's about people, and there is history to it. And I do think that people should learn history, but you don't have to. Who fucking cares? I don't care if you know about all my favorite hardcore releases from New York that happened in 1993. Like, you don't need to know that, you know? It's important to me, and I would hope that you find out about it and you dig deeper and you invest in the history, very rich cultural history that we have with this type of music. It's really cool to be a part of it. It's like, it's a privilege to be a part of this scene. So I do feel really strong about welcoming people and letting people exist in this space the way they do. But at the same time, I do have maybe it's old school, maybe it's definitive hardcore and what makes it special, but like what some people would call gatekeeping nature of hardcore. Now it's like, gatekeeping is a term that people throw around very loosely. It's like, for example, if you pull up to the hardcore gig and you have strange politics, you talking some white power shit or something like that. Well, guess what? I'm from Baltimore. It's the home of Stout. It's the home of Gut Instinct. It's like culturally who I am is like what we get off on is terrorizing those kind of people, you know? And it's funny because I've literally seen people in that argue be like, oh, gatekeeping hardcore. It's like, yo, who needs to defend people who believe in racism? like who needs to defend that? We don't. And obviously there's like other ideas that pop up, but I do think it's important that you give people the chance to learn and be a part of our community. It's strange. It's like, I don't think it's easy. I think people like to really portray this image of hardcore as again, like a gatekeeping place where everybody's not welcome, or like as this safe space where everybody's welcome. And it's neither of those things. It's like good people who want to contribute, people who care about other people. You're welcome, please. And I don't care what you know. I don't care about if you're cool. In fact, I'd prefer if you're not cool. You know, it's like most of us have like mental disabilities and shit. You know, it's like don't care about all that stuff. But it's like, do you want to be a part of a community? Do you want to contribute? Do you want to invest in this and help it grow? Like I love seeing that. And there is so much of that right now. And I think hardcore and punk are the coolest place it's been in my entire life of being involved, which is not exactly young. And I've been doing this since I was a child. So I don't know. You'll hear people criticize it. And I think that they are the kind of people who just would criticize anything. They're just ugly people who don't have a lot going on. There's always room for improvement. There's always room for new voices to tell us how it can be better. I've loved seeing specifically in the last 5 to 10 years, new voices making it more of an inclusive space. You know, I always speak about when I lived in Baltimore when I was younger and we were doing Trapped Under Ice stuff. I was investing all I could. I did everything that I thought was right. And me and another white friend that I worked with, we booked a lot of shows in Baltimore, which is not a predominantly white city, you know. And we were booking shows and working real hard, being like, we trying to make this inclusive. Like, what do we do? And sometimes it seemed like it's working, but it's not what it should be. We're doing all this. And then I left. I moved first to Richmond, Atlanta, Georgia, New York, Los Angeles. I lived everywhere. And I saw the scene kind of growing in Baltimore into something new. And then right around the time I moved back to Baltimore, I saw Zulu played at a venue, which is a Mexican restaurant in Baltimore called Holy Frijoles. And the crowd was, I mean, this is in every show, but, you know, Zulu demands a certain audience. It's pretty cool. But I was like one of like 10 white people in the room. And I saw the people who had become the pioneers of Baltimore, the people who've cultivated, made it who it is right now, or what it is right now. And it was most particularly Paris from Truth Cult and Akil from End It, Che, who runs Flat Spot, just brown people, you know? And really grateful for that, the advocates who've stepped up and decided they were going to make this place for everybody, you know? And there's still more room for growth in that department. And again, nothing's perfect, but it's really exciting to see it growing and changing and being what, I don't know, when I was a kid, I always referred to like the Bad Brains, I think it's 1982 CBGB set. Is that 82 sound right?
I think it's 82, yeah.
It's the one. It's the coolest live set you've ever seen in your life. But it was like everybody you could imagine. Everybody was present, you know, and like everybody looked cool, and there was no rules to how people moved. And my whole life I've been like, how can we recreate that moment? And you know, it wasn't for me to like do that. It was for people to come together. It's about creating a space where we allow that to happen.
I mean, it's a phrase that gets tossed around a lot, but I really do think like representation really does matter. Like I think when you see yourself on stage, you think, oh, like I want to be in that room.
Yeah.
And when I think if 5 bands play in a row and all 5 of those bands have 5 white guys in the band and that's it,
Mm-hmm.
you know, then like you're limiting the space even if you don't mean to be, I think.
Yeah, absolutely.
So speaking of End It, something I wanted to also ask about is you've been doing a fair amount of cool guest vocal spots lately. I mean, you're on the Fiddlehead record that came out 3 days ago, the End It from last year, the new Never Ending Game, the Touche Amore record, which is now a few years old. What gets you excited to sing on another band's record?
That authenticity, you know, it's like I said, coming back to Baltimore and seeing Akil and what he's done in our city, what he means to our city, and then like watching End It grow as like a very authentic band and just performing in service to our community. You know what I mean? It's like, dude, I want to be a part of that. It's not about like, is it going to be good for my career or am I going to get paid or something? It's like, dude, I just want to be a part of this. And like my voice is on that recording, and like, how fucking cool is that? I get to be a part of it, you know? I guess it's kind of like why we get into music and why we get into a lot of things when we're young. It's like, just want a place, you know? And I appreciate those bands and Touche Amore and Fiddlehead for seeing the world the way I do and then allowing me to have a place and cement my place in our culture. That Fiddlehead record's great. And it's like same thing. It's like, how cool is that to be like? I know that's one of the coolest hardcore adjacent records, uh, of a long. People are gonna remember remember that record forever. And that song is so authentic to who I am, and a sentiment that I've shared with Pat Flynn a little bit. So yeah, it's cool. I just want to be a part of real stuff,
Yeah. And yeah, that record's amazing. I mean, it's just, I feel like it's such a good time right now. Like, it just feels like so many like-minded bands are firing on all cylinders right now.
Yeah, and it's like I see so much room for growth, and it's like I don't know what that means. I don't know if it's like growth for specific bands or like for our community or like what it is. There's just like so much up to go. It's like so much of the world has been looking at our community for since I was a child. I've seen pop things happen that there's little references to hardcore, and all along I've said this is like a thing I always talk about. I'm like that. They stole that. They stole this line from hardcore. They stole this thing or this shirt design or whatever it is. And people always say this is like the cop out is, oh, it's universal consciousness. It's like, shut up, fuck you. No, it's not. That's not how this works. I don't write a lyric and someone else writes that lyric. It's not how the fuck it works, dude. It's just, I've seen it over and over and over again. And I've had it legitimized directly to me where that person eventually comes to me and says, hey, I took that thing from you. And you're like, that's crazy. You're a millionaire. I was homeless at that time. Why didn't I, why didn't you like break me off? Whatever. But the hardcore community has been influential as long as I've been alive, as long as I've been aware of the hardcore community. Punk rock has been influential to pop music. And it's cool now that I think that people are past the point of trying to hide that and just embracing it. And I think there's like, and I don't think that's a bad thing. I think it's a great thing. Like I know people are like, again, sensitive and personal, and they feel defensive of their community. But it's like, I think our community is progressive and cool. And it's like the world could benefit from hearing our songs. And I look forward to that. It's like, I look forward to like, not that I have anything against any pop stars right now, but it's like looking at like Kat from Scow and like her replacing some of the pop icons that we've had in my lifetime. Pretty fucking cool to me. I think that would equate to a better world,
Yeah, I mean, even like it's been fascinating to me just to see like how far Turnstile has gone, and it's like I know people personally who are just either don't listen to that music or have been checked out of it for a long time, and like Glow On got them back in or in for the first time.
Yeah.
And I'm like, to me, that's cool. I'm like, I want more people to want to see like loud bands with guitars. Like I don't want loud bands with the guitars to like be a thing on the fringe forever. Like I think it's cool that like 6,000 people want to go see a band like that in the same night.
Yeah. When I was a kid, it was like a thing where I was like the rocker where I lived, and it wasn't a lot of rockers. And it was like a thing where like my friends, my peers and kids at school would be like, oh, Justice, he's a rocker. And they would like have these like funny assumptions and be like, oh, you like Korn, or you like fucking, well, I do like Korn, but that's a bad example. Do you like, I guess when Linkin Park popped up, that was the big thing. Like, oh, you must like Linkin Park. And I'd be like, I've never had anything against Linkin Park, but it's like, it's not my thing. Like I like hardcore music. And, it's cool to me now that I have so much conversations with friends who are less involved in our community. Be like, oh yeah, I like rock and roll music. You like Turnstile? And I'm like, actually, yeah, it's some of the people I look up to most in the world. It's like, that's a lot cooler. And now we have a common thing that we can discuss that makes me feel less alien and makes me feel better about the world, I guess.
Yeah. So I wanted to ask, so Trapped Under Ice did that kind of like comeback record after the first two Angel Dust albums. Now that you're kind of back playing all these festivals again, do you think you'd ever do another Trapped Under Ice record?
I would love to. It's like just a matter of timing. Like right now it's like Angel Dust is going to be touring a lot on Brand New Soul. Turnstile is super busy, so Brendan's going to be, who knows, man, I can't keep up with how much they got going on. It's like I've never experienced any friend with that much demand in their life, you know. So it's like hard to say. It's like you know, it's like who knows what he's going to be up to. And then everybody else has like careers and children and wives. Um, so it's like a slow moving process, but I do think that the desire is there. And it's like, you know, every so often I get a riff from one of the guys, or I send them a riff, and we like just uh, romanticize the idea of doing a record. But you know, when the time's right, I think it will happen. But I couldn't put a time frame on it, you know.
Sure.
And certainly, it would be, if it happens, it would demand that we have that spirit that I've been talking about, the soul of rock and roll music, and it has to be authentic to the human experience. And that's the only circumstances. Outside of that, I'll record 100 records and throw them away. It will mean nothing to me. I just don't want to put anything in the world that's not real.
Yeah, and I mean, you know, like the music that you've been making more recently obviously is quite different than what Trapped Under Ice usually sounds like. Even what Brendan is doing now is quite different. Um, like I don't know, like you don't have to definitively answer this, but if Trapped Under Ice made a record, like what do you imagine it would sound like? Do you think that it would only be a Trapped Under Ice record if it was a certain level of heavy, or do you think as long as it's those people, whatever comes out, that's what it would be?
I think the mutual desire would be to make the heaviest thing possible. Like there's been themes in Trapped Under Ice, like in moments when we recorded, there's always like a story. There's like a moment, like how do we tell this moment of the story, you know? And I remember when we did Biggest Goodnight, I was like, I don't want to make the heaviest record ever possible. I'm not trying to make the heaviest thing, because at that time there was a couple of bands that stood out to me. I want to say King Nine was probably one of them, and Zabalba. Um, kind of hard to put myself back in that mind frame right now, but there's bands that were just doing music that was so heavy that was like, I'm not trying to make the heaviest record. Like, look at that shit. Like Zabalba was like the fucking evil, scariest shit I've ever heard in my life. You know, I'm not going to put out the heaviest record with that. So at the time we were, how do we do the coolest heavy record, the most catchy, like ear candy? And that exists in all of us. We're also fans of pop music, that we couldn't make something without thinking of ear candy and moments that suck you in. But we've all just been such a fan of like really heavy stuff, and we haven't gotten to make anything like that in a while. So every time we jam, that's like kind of the theme is like we did Heat Wave. I kind of wrote the majority of that record, and that was kind of like the theme then was you know, Terror had Lowest of the Low, and Hatebreed had Satisfaction, and it was like these early records with short banger fast songs. So with Heat Wave, I was like, that's kind of more my lane. I'm like the one that was pushing for the short, faster songs with Trapped Under Ice. And I was like, let's make this kind of record. And the idea at the time was we're going to immediately follow it up with a record that was a little more of Sam's writing. Sam is the other predominant writer in the band. Um, and it was like, I was like, let's do the short, fast songs and make it. And I think that kind of spoke to young people at the time. I was like, let's give something to young people who want that. Like kids like me who have ADHD and like just like need something, and then the next song, and then something like intense, and then song's over before you know it. So again, the idea was like fast songs, a little more leaning towards my style of writing. Again, everybody got involved, everybody wrote on the record, but it was like just leaning towards what I do a little more. And then the idea was to release a real heavy record afterwards. And I think we never got to do that. There was like just life things that happened. Some babies happened, some other bands happened, and we never really saw that vision through. So that's kind of what I perceive to be the next Trapped Under Ice. But who knows? It's, again, in order to be authentic, you need to go where it takes you. So if we get in a studio and we're our practice space, we're making music, and we feel like we want to do some weird shit, we're gonna do some weird shit, you know. But I think everybody just sits around listening to Dying Fetus all day long and wants to make the most ignorant thing imaginable.
Awesome. Well, anything else you want to add about Brand New Soul, or anything you want to plug before we go?
No, I'm That's it. It's been my whole life as Brand New Soul the last couple months, which is really exciting. But I'm also like just, and I got tunnel vision right now. It's like everything to me. So I appreciate you giving me the chance to talk about it.
Yeah, well, I appreciate you coming on the show. I mean, it's been a blast, and I think it's a great record, and I'm stoked for it to come out.
Thank you, man.
And I'm stoked for you guys to play New York again, because seeing you earlier this year at Brooklyn was like one of the most fun shows I've seen all year.
Cool. I think it's going to be a really special show. That's the last show of our 3.5 months of tour that we have coming up. So if we don't sound incredible, then something's wrong. You know?
Hey, thanks so much to Justice. Thanks for listening. Go pick up Brand New Soul when it's out September 8th via Popwig Records. Catch Angel Dust on tour. Their tour starts September 6th in the UK. The North American run starts in their hometown of Baltimore on November 3rd. And for those in New York, it ends in Brooklyn with a show at Elsewhere on December 10th. And Angel Dust is a really, really good live band, so I highly recommend catching this tour if it comes near you. And if you like what you hear, tell your friends about us, give us a good rating. It's all that small stuff goes a really long way. Thanks so much. See you next time.